Hi guys, it's Connie here from Say It With Simplicity, and I'm here in Silhouette Studio today, and I'm going to be sharing a tutorial with you on how to create a football vector like this one in Silhouette Studio. Now, I created this in the business edition of Silhouette Studio, and I'm going to be using a couple of things in my tutorial that are in the Designer Plus or in the business edition. And I will leave links to those two software upgrades in the description box below. But I'm also going to be sharing with you a couple of ways that you can do this without having to have the designer or the business edition of Silhouette Studio. Now keep in mind that when I'm sharing tutorials with you, I'm not usually bringing in a vector or a photograph and tracing, but I am creating these images from scratch. And so as I go, I like to share some design techniques, and sometimes there's different ways to do things in Silhouette Studio or multiple ways to do things in Silhouette Studio. So I like to share those things as well. So sometimes what I can do in a very short time myself ends up being a little bit longer of a video because I am sharing some of those tips and techniques, maybe more than one way of doing things in Silhouette. So I hope that this doesn't confuse you as I go along. So let's get started at creating the football, and I'm going to be using my flexi shapes for this, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab the diamond shape from the flexi shapes, and I'm just going to drag this out. Now the white dots drag out that shape, and the red dots on the flexi shapes for this diamond make this wider or narrower. And so let's just kind of let's go about there. Now we want to be able to point edit this shape, and we can't do that because we need to make this into a path. So let's go ahead and click on this and go convert to path. And now you can see that if you double click on that, your point editing panel opens and you have your 4 edit points, and now you're ready for some point editing. Now let's go ahead and our football isn't in the orientation that we want it in, so we're going to go to Object, we're going to go to Rotate, and we're going to rotate that to 90 degrees clockwise. And it wouldn't matter, you could go counterclockwise too, but you want to rotate it 90 degrees. Now, you could also use an oval for doing this, but let me show you this way first, and I'm going to go back into that point editing mode, and you can choose these points one at a time, and you can make a curve, but you can also choose them, choose multiple points at a time by holding down your Shift key and clicking, and you can see when you get the red lines, that's going to make that particular line segment a curve. And so let's go ahead, then you can release your Shift key and make curve. And now you have, let's see, I didn't do this one. You have all of your line segments in that shape a curve. And you also see that you have all of those handles of that shape. And what those do is you can adjust those handles. And so say we want our football to maybe be a little bit rounder at the top. We can drag out those handles. and we want it to be a little bit more pointed at the ends. We can drag in the handles. And we can click on the whole thing and make it wider, narrower by dragging the bounding box. And so say that's the shape that we want for our football. So if you don't have that diamond shape and you wanted to just do an ellipse, you can go to your regular shapes and you can drag out your ellipse. And you can point edit that in the same way that we did for that diamond shape. And remember that if you want to use keyboard shortcuts, you can press your E on your keyboard and drag out your ellipse without having to go over here to grab one. Okay, so let's go ahead. We'll start editing our football or finishing our football here. Now I want to create the stripes for the football, and so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab a rectangle, and I'm going to draw my rectangle horizontally, and you'll see why in a minute. I'm going to go to my warp panel, and I'm going to go to, if you're in Designer Plus or the Business Edition, you have this conical warp feature, and I'm going to do a conical warp on my rectangle that I have here. So let's go ahead. We're going to conical warp this, and I don't want it to be really curved, but I'm just going to give it a little bit of curve. Let's just do a little bit over, maybe about, you can drag the bar here, or you can put in a number. Let's do 7 once. And drag my panel up to the top and hit apply. And now I have that curved rectangle for the stripes on my football. Now you wouldn't necessarily have to curve this. I think that you can achieve that football look by just doing a regular rectangle on the ends of your football, and that's would be perfectly fine. So if you don't have that Designer Plus or that Business Edition, no worries. You could simply do a rectangle at the ends of your football. So let's go ahead. Let's grab this rectangle now, and we want to rotate this. Object, rotate by 90 degrees clockwise. Now obviously this is too long for my football, and I only have one of them. So I want to replicate this, and I can do that by Control D. I could copy and paste. I could do Control C, Control V. There's different ways that you can replicate that. I'm going to get rid of some of my extras. One of the ways that I like to copy and paste this, because I want to mirror this in the end. So say I did Control D, then I'd have to go up here and I'd have to go to Object, Mirror, Flip Horizontally, and I can do that. But one of the things I find really easy is if I hold down Shift and Alt and then hit my right arrow key, and now I mirrored that image and copied it at the same time, or duplicated it at the same time. So now I'm going to drag that that arrow over here. I'm going to drag that stripe over here. And you can see the blue line down that comes on down here at the bottom of my right there it is. That means that those are aligned right there at the bottom. The other thing I could do would be to grab both of these by holding down my shift key and aligning these at the bottom. But what I have with that blue line is called smart snapping, and you can enable that smart snapping in your page setup panel. Go to this little grid and click on enable smart snapping, and there you go. You can see that where that blue line comes on right there. So now you know that those are lined up at the bottom, and I'm going to hit my shift key on both of those, and I'm going to so that I can select both of them together, and now I'm going to group them. And the reason I'm going to group them is I want to align them to the football. And now I could mouse over all of that and click on center. I could also bring down some guides from the top and the side, and that's also in your setup panel under the guides, show guides, or not show guides. And I can align that right to those guides. Okay, so now that I have everything aligned, I'm going to do an offset on my football. So I'm going to open the offset panel, and I'm going to do internal offset. And I'm going to bump this up to let's do 0.175 and click apply. And while that's still selected, the internal offset is selected at this point, I'm going to click on these stripes by holding down my shift key, and so now both of those will be selected, and I'm going to go to Object, Modify, Crop, and that's going to crop those stripes down so that they're on the inside of that football. So now my offset is gone, I've cropped my stripes, and now I'm going to go to Object, Modify, Subtract, and let's turn our football brown, and you can see that this would be a cut line, and you can see through those ends of our football. So if you were to layer this onto something white, your white stripes would show through. So if we wanted to go back here, we could make a copy of this. So you could go any way of copying it. I find the easiest way to copy it is to hold down my Alt. You get a little plus sign with an arrow and just drag that copy. Now we can go back to our Object, Modify, Subtract, and make our football brown. We could make this white. We could send this to the back. And now if we wanted a layered image, we'd have that for behind our football. All right, so let's finish up the rest of our football vector. I'm going to go and grab a rounded rectangle. Let's change the outline of that to white. And we'll zoom in here. I'm just turning off the fill on the football, and that'll just make this a little bit easier. And now for these laces, you can play around with that roundedness of the rectangle by using these little red dots that are connected to it. I want just the ends to be a little bit rounded. And so let's leave it at that, and let's go ahead and we'll do one that's vertical for our laces. And you can see how that snaps to that blue line. Let's color that in. And let's just kind of line it up towards the end. And we'll convert that to path. And now let's go ahead and replicate that. I want 8 of these, so I already have 1. I'm going to put in a 7. And this is the advanced replicate. And I want them to go to the right, and now I'm going to click on replicate, and that's going to replicate those across my horizontal rectangle. And I'm just going to go ahead and kind of slide this up toward the end. And now I'm going to grab all of those gray ones. I can go to select by color. It's going to select all those gray. And I'm going to go to this quick access, and I'm going to space them horizontally, and I'm going to group them. So now I can align these to my guides, and I can align this to my guides. It already is. And now if I mouse over all of these, I can weld, and I have my laces for my football. So let's zoom out here a little bit, and I can do a couple of things at this point. I'm going to make a copy of my laces, and I'm going to make an extra copy of my football here, and I'm going to go to this file that I just created, and I'm going to go to Object. I moused over all of this, and I'm going to go to Object, Modify, Subtract, and let's turn that to brown and see what we have. And we have a single layer football that if this was on a white background, you can see if I send that to the send panel, it would send in just this one layer. Now if I want multiple layers, I could take my white background that I created before, and I could take this one that I saved in this step, and this is why I like to save parts of my design. And then let's change this to black. And right click and bring it to front. And I can snap that right to the guidelines to align it. And now I have a little bit of a different look if I wanted to create a little bit more of a 3D look to my football design. So maybe if this was a paper cut, I'd have a little bit of a 3D with my white background, my brown overlay, and then my black laces. And so I could kind of use that both ways. So if this was on a white background, or if I wanted to make it 3D and put it on a card, I could do that either way. Okay, so let's shrink these down a little bit. And what did you think of creating this football vector? Is this something that you would use for creating projects with your silhouette? And would you use the single layer design, or do you like the multi-layer design better? Let me know in the comments section below. Also, if you have any questions or comments, I'd like to hear those as well. I'd also like to hear what other kinds of videos you'd like to see. Would you actually like to see some crafts? Would you like to see more tutorials of this sort? Would you like to see some more beginner tutorials in Silhouette Studio? I'd love to hear from you. If you like this video, I hope that you'll give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you next time. Bye now.